Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Hello. Good morning. Getting it together on this end. Running wild already. Let's see. Good morning, Chrissy. Good morning, Joelle. Good morning, Heather. I'll see you in a little while. Mom is there. I sent you a message a little bit earlier. It is sunny and bright. How nice. It's one of these like sunglasses mornings driving around. Really nice. Good morning, Doreen. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Linda B and Linda H, both logged in. Good morning. I know we're going to have good morning, Catherine. Good morning, Lisa from Pennsylvania. That's right. Be sure to click thumbs up. That helps a lot. Here, let me scroll back a little bit. I'm so close to the camera. We'll see who else logs on. Well, good morning, everybody. Let me know as we go along what my quality is here. I am thinking because it's a bright day that maybe we're having better luck with the pixelation problem. Okay, super. Thank you, Doreen. Thank you so much. At the new place, the studio spot, the internet's going in right now. The guy is there. So hopefully that turns out to be something really good that I can do very reliable streams there. My only problem is that I have learned there is a recording studio right next door, which is no problem, strangely. It's like super loud, booming music when they do it, but they never do it during the day. And they rarely do it not on the weekend. So that part's okay. But weirdly, underneath me is a personal trainer who doesn't do classes. It's just him alone. But his music is like the pulsating heart of hell coming through the building and it's like he's got one person in there and the music is enough to like make your ears bleed. I just don't understand. So I'm going to have to speak to him, make sure that he doesn't, for that 1/2 hour a day, mess with 11:30 to 12, because I just think it's insane. I don't know how you can exercise when your ears are bleeding anyway, but it is what it is. Obviously, I'm not doing a lot of exercising lately, so maybe I'm just turning into an old fuddy-duddy in my old age. So speaking of old age, it's Teddy's birthday on Thursday. Trying to think of what to do. I have to talk to you about that, Mom, because we're getting slammed with a snowstorm tomorrow night. And Teddy wants to have cake and sigami. That's all he wants. We have very low expectations from past years, because in past years, we would normally, for Jossie's birthday, the last day of September, have an outdoor fall carnival with like tons, maybe 20, 30 wooden games that I've built. Like there's a bowling alley, there's the throwing games, there's tons of games over the years that I've been adding to. And that would be like a whole neighborhood blowout to mark like fall and Halloween. And now would be typically we would have Teddy's birthday on the last day of school before the break. So the kids are hyped and wired. And me and my mom would be driving off to the grocery store to get a ton of sheet pizzas. And there'd be Christmas trees set up in every room and Christmas music blasting and all the winter themed and Christmas themed toys that I've made, throwing games again, galleries, hockey games. All the furniture would be cleared out of the rooms and we'd be in here doing that. So obviously this year is very different. Good morning, Amber. Good morning, Joan. Good morning, Brandy. So this is such a weird year. You know, we're just making it work, but everything is like so watered down and I think so hard on the kids, you know. We'll see how it goes. But I have been a fireball and I've been working on dyeing. I had a big order from Kathy, and a lot of it I had to redye. So since last night, I have done 39 colors. I've been dyeing like crazy. Some original colors, and so look at this. Look at the state of the art system I have going. Look at the luxury of this. Broken box. I'm going to put them probably in one of those, you know, those albums that you can hold like maybe baseball cards, something like that in, and you can slip things into pockets. I think I'm going to do that with all the swatches I just made because I lost my old swatch card. Thanks, Chrissy. And I really wanted to do some new colors, and I really wanted to get clarity for myself. I redyed some of the colors that are like existing colors, like Cushing colors and things, because sometimes there's not much difference between like Cushing's old rose and a different brand's rose, wild rose or something. And I just needed to have clarity. It's a good thing to do it. If you're a dyer, you probably do it already. I never have time for this stuff, but since I had so many things to dye, I thought, let me get some clarity and get some of these things straightened out, because I'm thinking now about spring colors. You know, it's just, I just can't think autumn colors at all. So I'm thinking winter colors transitioning into spring colors, and 39 colors since yesterday. Can you bring over the piece I'm working on over there on the frame? I completely forgot to grab that. I want to show you. I haven't made a ton of progress with my monthly thing, my kit. But I'm getting there. And it's not that I haven't been busy. It's just that I haven't had time to sit and hook. Let me take it off the frame because I think it'll look a bit better. So the monthly kits have yarn again this month. I love working with yarn and a few extra fancy fibers. I always like to put in some surprises into those kits. But I just want to remind you, virus and threat protection. I just want to remind you, I'm doing the larger version of the monthly kit. So for people doing the monthly kit, you've got the 10 by 10. And just so you know, I'm still treating it as somewhat of a beginner's kit. Good morning, Karen. Thank you, Penny. I'm treating it as somewhat of a beginner's kit, and the angel is much larger on the beginner's kit. So for me, I'm going to be hooking the angel a little bit smaller. I'm sticking with a cross stitch on top. I haven't gotten really far. I've got the house kind of in outline and the tree in outline in the back. I'm experimenting with snowflakes, and I had already sorted out my color sort of gradation, the colors moving from one to the next, completely different colors. So I've got that part sorted. Now I'm just filling it in. So this is where I am with this. And hopefully after the snow day, now that I'm pretty caught up with orders, thanks, Karen, I'll be working on this more and you'll see this more. But for beginners, your kits have either gone out or are about to go out, and you've got all the same colors as me, tons of little balls of yarn. And just think about how you want to do it, because I haven't got mine finished, and that's different this month. And it's partly because I did the thing with the hands and I did the crackers, which were super time consuming, and I just haven't stopped. But normally I would have time to finish that and show you first as an example. But I know you're all good enough at this point that even if mine isn't complete, you've got all your yarns and all your special things, and I know they will all be huge successes. So you might get yours finished sooner than mine, and if so, please share. So since I am not overly pixelated today so far, I just want to recap what we were doing yesterday. We were talking about new kinds of inspiration. And the crossover, I had the crossover thing out. I posted this in the Facebook group, the idea of doing the Pearl McGowan, one of my oldies, with the Mackenzie Childs grid. And we were looking at Mackenzie Childs. I posted some pictures. Victoria and Richard make Mackenzie Childs. And their style, their very checkerboard graphic style, upside down. But that kind of a style in the background of an existing pattern. Because just judging from eBay and seeing what people are listing on the Facebook groups, it's very clear that there are a lot of people with a lot of older patterns or old-fashioned patterns that are still wonderful, but maybe you overbought or maybe you inherited a lot and you just don't have enough time for that many florals and scrolls in your life, and you're looking to do something different, but reluctant to get rid of nice old, particularly Pearl McGowan or Jane patterns. And if that's the case, it's nice to think of how you might add a layer of interest. I don't even want to say modern. I just want to say different, because there's nothing modern about a checkerboard, but something different, an element to an existing pattern that is all your own. You could do the Vincent van Gogh sky, right? That's all. Vincent van Gogh is copyright free. He's been dead for 100 years. You could do a Vincent van Gogh sky behind a Pearl McGowan. You could do a Kay Facet style. His sort of lion's paw type circles within circles, bullet hole motifs. Any of that kind of thing would work great. So I've been thinking about looking at other artists who sometimes pop up that I've never heard of, that are a bit too new for me. This person, this is the one I was making reference to yesterday. You probably have heard of her. I hadn't. Not particularly a rug person, but she does a lot of rugs. I'm going to show you examples of her work, another idea for inspiration. So this is Judi, Judi, Biosson. I was going to say Boisson, but it's not. It's Biosson. I'm going to show you her name too. So this is an example. I printed out some examples of her work because she, like Mackenzie Childs, like Claire Murray, does not only rugs, but house stuff, coverlets, pillowcases, and it's going to be machine made if you buy it, but it's also going to be insanely expensive. because it's designer, it's collectible, and the things that are not currently in the web stores, good morning, are very hard to get. Even on Facebook Marketplace, we're talking about close to $1,000 for a rug from either of these people. So this is an example of Judi. If you want to research her, she's much more Southwestern in style, sort of Native American Southwestern. So very different, but still very cottagey and country. Another idea of things that you can do with original designing in 2021, or dropping behind an existing design. If you've got one of those great pearl rugs that have an open center and just like a scrolled border, and you're looking for something for the center, lots of ideas. So this is Judi Biosson. She does a lot of knitted rugs. She manufactures a lot of very expensive knitted rugs. And we've talked about knitted rugs so many times: shirred rugs, knitted rugs, crocheted rugs, embroidered rugs, yarn rugs, hook rugs, latch rugs, so many kinds of rugs, right? She does a lot with knitted rugs and hooked rugs. This is, I think, a hooked one. This is an older hooked one that's on Facebook. It's got one little blemish on it, but it's like a nice train image for a boy's room. But these are definitely knitted. Very, very expensive, but beautiful geometric ideas. She borrows a lot from the quilting catalog of designs, right? So that's always interesting because we love crossover. This is Judi. And these are pillows that she does. Again, they're not hand done, but they're punched. They're machine punched. And, I know I've said this before, but it's been a while. When you see this kind of punch on a pillow, because you often see it at an antique store, that kind of thing, much older than these. When you see punch on a plain background, that's called feather tufting. That's a style of Waldoboro, which is sculpting, that is very specific when you leave the background blank. I'm going to do a whole chapter on Waldoboro. Maybe we'll do that on Friday. There's so much to say about Waldoboro rugs, and there's so much interest and there's so much history there. Maybe that'll be our fun Friday blowout. But in any case, when you see these partially punched or partially hooked pillows, particularly, it's known as feather tufting, particularly if they're sculpted. But regardless, these are very sort of cowboy influence. This is what her house stuff looks like. You're seeing these hooked pillows or punched pillows with the quilts. And this is for you quilters. I know you love a pairing like this. It's really inspiring, this sort of Hawaiian applique, and then the very traditional log cabin, but done in Southwest colors. Interesting, right? It's just another layer of interest. Someone else to Google and go down the rabbit hole. If you're looking for new ideas, if you're looking for new designs, there is no reason on earth why you shouldn't do something that looks like a Southwestern design with log cabin in it or around the border. There's no reason why you can't tap into any quilt design. Most quilt squares, 99.99%, are going to be traditional, and you can use them for your designs too, because we know how well quilting patterns translate into hooking patterns. And these are two more of her hooked rugs. So again, very strong influence here with the quilting design. And here, more traditional, this is a rug design, again, machine, but really beautiful, classic basket. It's not, you see a lot of baskets, and we always love a good basket, but it's nice to see the basket with that complete of a wreath around it. I think that makes it really different. So we've got two elements that we see often in rug hooking, but then look at the corners. They've done a geometric at the corners. It gives it that kind of kitcheny, because we know that geometric rugs were usually used in bedrooms and kitchens, not in front rooms or company rooms. But giving it that geometric corner, how different is that? Can you think of a design that you've seen that has a basket with or without a floral wreath that also has a geometric? Because I wouldn't think of that. I would do a basket and I would think about doing something floral in the corner. This is something that was interesting for me. It really caught my eye, this one. So these are all the Judi. Let me show you the spelling of her name in case you want to go down the rabbit hole later. It's a bit of an odd spelling. Judi, Biosson. So the only reason I found her was because I was looking at Facebook Marketplace, as I say to always do. I was looking at Facebook Marketplace yesterday, and I got a beautiful Promagown rug that I recognize the pattern of, that I will show you when I pick it up. I was supposed to pick it up tomorrow, but there's going to be snow, for $25. It's in perfect condition. It's a mid-century rug. It's beautiful. If you go onto Facebook, check Facebook Marketplace, hooked rug, hook rug, handmade rug, latch rug. Sometimes hooked rugs are listed under latch rugs because people just don't know. And that's how I also found Judi. Some of her rugs came up like in the 700s and 800s, and I thought, who is this person? What is going on? And then I looked her up and I realized that she's a proper designer. And just like Mackenzie Childs, there is a huge money market niche for people who collect just her stuff. So then I sort of understood. I never really understand why machine made stuff gets to be that kind of a price, but indeed it does. So switching gears completely, since I have half my time left, I wanted to show you a book. You know what? Let me just recap yesterday before we get to this book. I'm going to show you a book that I've been looking at in bed the last couple of nights. It's an oldie but a goodie. Jossie, I'm doing coffee time. She's talking about video games from the toilet behind the closed door, but I bet this microphone picks her up. This is a great book. If you love, it's a big hallelujah. That's a cute dog, huh? And that's a cute little boy. That's my Teddy. Oops. Oops, 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 oops. No interference. So this is a really nice book for people, people like us who love folk art, who love rugs. If you love different kinds of folk art, if you love your weather vanes, your pottery, your old tavern signs, anything to do with, American folk art, then this is going to be one of the best books you've ever found. So this is called The Folk Arts and Crafts of New England by Priscilla Sawyer, Sawyer, and Daniel Foley, Foley. And this is what it looks like. Doesn't always have his dust jacket and doesn't really matter. There's a chapter for just about, it's a large book. There's a chapter for just about every folk art that you can think of. And of course, rugs is one of them. So I'm going to come to this in a minute because it's got figureheads, right? Like figureheads in here. And each chapter is almost like written in a conversational tone. They're telling you the history of it, but these are quite good histories. It's very different than, this is written in the late 60s. Weaving, carving, hat boxes, printing wallpaper, candles and rush lighting, like all the early types of lighting, candle holders, makers, molds, things like that, shortbread molds, everything, samplers, everything, lace making. This is one of the things at the beginning that caught my eye. This is a bed rug, right? So this is possibly hooked, possibly yarn, impossible to tell, and it doesn't say. I think this book, the first edition was 67. This one I have is second printing, so like 72 or something. But this is a beautiful initialed rug, a bed rug. And I'm going to come to that in just a minute, but I'm going to refer to this book in 2 seconds in case you want to write that one down, because that's going to be a really cute one. Now, we were looking yesterday at how funny it was to know that between 1941, when Kent did his little primer, and 1947, when Hazel Kelly puts out her little primer for rug hooking, that during this gap was the time that we went from I'm going to try this again, just briefly, when we went from very graphic, simple design to a lot of shading, a completely different school. So let me see if this works today. I want to show you some of the examples. This is just a pamphlet. So we know William Winthrop Kent has this series of books. The first book's on rug hooking. Very good information, but this pamphlet's very scarce. So I want to show you some of these because it's very hard to find this. And if you don't find it, you might want your eyes to see some of the things that I'm seeing here. Things like this, really unusual. And he says 2 Canadian rugs. There's not a lot of detail here, but you can see in place of shading during this time, the earlier rugs, even this kind of thing, the color is very flat. It's very graphic. There's common use of outlining for definition rather than shading. The idea of shading just, number one, hasn't come up. And number two, isn't a thing because you're typically using your cast off clothing. So you're not going to have 17 shades of raspberry. You're not there yet. You don't have the leisure time in your kitchen to be fooling around with chemical dyes and making 17 shades of raspberry. You're using your coat from last year that has 100 holes in it. So that's why we're getting this kind of shift. We're seeing this kind of shift at this time. But these early rugs that he shows us, they're all black and white, of course, but they are beautiful. Oh, Joan says, Joan here, I am not a hooker, but I hooked a crochet rug from scraps of yarn. How can I be a hooker using your technique? Joan, we will tell you all about it. You just need a hook and you need a backing. We'll tell you all about it. It's super fun. It just opens up a lot more possibilities. But this early book, I can't say enough about checking out early. I'm showing you a lot of pages because it is not currently in print. And if something is catching your eye as something that is important that you see right now to get your inspiration, I want to be sure you don't miss it. So none of these rugs are going to have shading, and I've just said the reason why. Look at these adorable ones. Again, he doesn't know much other than this is one of the ones I'm going to show you is an 18th century, and the other one is 1820. So this one is an 1820 rug, and this is 18th century. Beautiful basket, very simple. Thanks, Karen. And you're seeing a lot of shading in the background. Is part of it the fact that the dyes in the fabric, the clothing, certainly the clothing that they've used, clothing, blankets, that kind of thing? Is it possible that the color variation is because it has faded over time? Yes. Is it possible that all of it is that? No, because you can see there are striations of light and dark. And if it were all the same material, the same coat or the same blanket, it would have evenly faded or more evenly faded. We've got someone who has worked very, very hard to use darks in the right place and lights in the right place. And they haven't had enough of any one thing. So they've had to make do and make it work. And that's just what they've done. And that is part of the beauty of the early rugs. So then we come to Hazel Kelly. This is the other pamphlet I showed yesterday. And we are talking about Pearl McGowan, but we're not actually saying her name. So this would be troubling now, but at this point, less troubling. Just about every pattern in here is going to be a Pearl McGowan. Again, I said yesterday, some of them might be heritage from Rhode Island, the company that did real similar stuff. There's so many people doing similar stuff. It's very hard to nail it unless you find an example of the pattern with the name on it. But one thing that all of the rugs in this book have in common is they are all heavily shaded. And that is where that break is. In the 1940s, you are getting people who are really striving to do really, really finely shaded work, completely different. So moving on from that thought, one more. Just so pretty, even in black and white. It gets you thinking, right? This one's really different, isn't it? That's really different. Cluster with that sort of single leaf or feather border. Really different. But these little books are priceless. Again, when you see them pop up, you should grab them. I was looking at this too. This was quite funny, the teaching manual. And this was put out by Putnam Fadeless Dyes, right? So we don't really hear about Putnam anymore. Sometimes you see one of their antique display signs for $1,000 in an antique store. But this is a cute book. They're talking about dyeing for clothing, for bedding, for curtains, silk, satins, everything. They're talking about tinting. Putnam used to put out a line of dyes that smells, that were perfumed, not just tinted with color, but tinted with scent. And yeah, I don't know of anybody that does that anymore. I think that must have been such a nice thing to be able to not only choose your color, but choose your scent. Of course, we do that with shampoos and things like that. But the dye itself, it's quite nice. And they're even showing you at this early date. Now, this Putnam book is 1951. They're showing you tie-dyeing, right? Of course, it went very different in the 1960s, a few decades later, or one decade later, 1951. But they're showing you early examples of actually using ties to tie-dye, doing batik stuff, doing ombre dyeing on your clothing, and then a very short history of hooked rugs, just for one page. And again, very vague. It's typical of that time. But they do give us two beautiful color rugs, the only color in this little pamphlet. And they're saying that these dyes produced these color combinations. And what's funny, again, is they're not saying who the designer of the rugs are. So they're just, I guess, saying that these are their colors is enough in this day and age, because as far as I know, they do braided rugs too. They didn't put out patterns. This one's for you, Joan. This chapter, this one little page is on crocheted rugs. So cute. So when we look back historically, and I know we like to look back historically on this show, the different kinds of rugs that have been popular, the different fads that have been popular, I want to go right back to the beginning this time. So we just looked at that bed rug on the bed. So keep that in your mind. And I'm back in this book, right? I'm coming back over here. I want to show you this color picture of somebody who really loved their hooked rugs. Now, I recognize that eagle and the lion in front of the fireplace, the welcome mat. These are all rugs that we see versions of with the Pearl McGowan designs and the heritage designs, and any designs from that era, you see similar types of things. But in this book, not just in the rug hooking chapters, you're seeing lots of examples of hooked rugs. And again, you're seeing the geometric rugs. Make sure nothing's burning. In the bedroom, in the kitchen, not always in other places, because they're considered not as much prestige in doing a hooked rug. Now, the chapter on hooked rugs is several pages. It's worth getting this book for, in my opinion. Early example of a hooked rug. They're also not saying whose design it was, but they're telling us that it's at the Shelburne Museum. So that's a good start. I like how they named this chapter Rugs and Comfort, because if you think about it, we're not talking about early America, right? Because we're not talking about settlement years like 1620, the Mayflower. We're not talking about that century, because there are no hooked rugs at that time. There's imported rugs. There's different kinds of rugs. We'll get into that in a second, but there are not going to be hooked rugs yet. So we're talking about rugs in terms of comfort. And as you can imagine, during the early years of settlement, rugs are a luxury. There's a lot of other things to worry about, like surviving, existing, feeding yourself, having shelter, having heat, being somewhat clean, steering clear of disease and doing the best you can with hygiene around your house. But you've just built a house, and it's a new world, the settlement years. And they do a very brief history of the rug in this chapter that I want to share, because it ties in to everything that we talk about and everything that we do. And it's just interesting chronologically, knowing the hooked rugs will come later. It's interesting and important to know what came right before too. So this is a really short history, and I'm even paraphrasing it, but they're talking about, I'm going to do a direct quote here. In 1634, John Winthrop. Now, John Winthrop is one of the early settlers, and he's one of the most important men in the Plymouth Bay colony, which is the colony and the settlement that was set up by the Mayflower Pilgrims. And more people will come immediately, but he's one of the primary players during those years, an extreme Puritan, but also a lawyer and a very big name at that time. So John Winthrop obtained from England, and this is a quote, mingle colored checkered rugs, and none of those words are spelt the way that we would spell them now, partly tawny but mostly wholly red. 10 years later, Miles Standish inventoried the estate of Stephen Hopkins and listed both yellow and green rugs. Blue and white were other color rugs that were listed in Massachusetts inventories during the first 40 years of the colony. That's extraordinary, right? If you think about going in and out of pilgrims' homes and finding rugs that are red, blue, yellow, and green, it's kind of unexpected, because weren't you just thinking no rug or just brown? No, everything is bright and beautiful, right? As beautiful as it can be, because historically people have loved color. The idea of white is a 20th century thing, that people suddenly love white and they think it makes your room look bigger if everything's painted white. Back in the day, going back, the more color and the more rare the color you could find, whether it was for your walls or your fabric or your clothing, the more rare the color, the better the thing was, right? It would be like a prestige thing, having something really, really, for George Washington at his place, Mount Vernon, what was the color? It was called like, it'll come to me in a minute, like a patina kind of name to it, but it was extremely rare, and that was why he wanted it. Oh man, I just lost our page. Did I seriously do that when we've always got a time thing? There we go. So, all right, back to the quote. This is a long chapter. So then they talk about how the word itself, rug, is actually a Scandinavian word with two G's. So R-U-G-G. It goes back to that period. The Oxford English Dictionary, this is really interesting, and this is why I showed you the picture of the bed rug. The Oxford English Dictionary reminds us in the definition of rug of the quote, snug as a bug in a rug. And that goes back to the 18th century, right? The 1700s, because you would have the rug, like the rug I just showed you, on your bed. And then you might, during the day, put it on the floor for insulation, for warmth. It made sense to do that. But when you didn't have multiple, you would use it in both places. And you were actually using something, the weight and the same sort of coarseness of a rug as your bed cover. And you were doing that for a couple hundred years because you didn't have a choice. So then it talks about how the most primitive dwellings in the United States would have earthen floors, of course, right? You do what you can with what you've got for the moment. And of course, those were cold and damp and dirty. So what people would have to do, coming in and out constantly and getting more dirty, was they would scatter dried leaves and rushes, like cattail rushes, anything that you could find, any kind of bracken, any kind of fern. But you would first want to dry it with like a stewing process in your old colonial hearth style cat thing that swung out, and you would put your stuff, super dangerous, big open hearts. You would want to dry all that stuff that you found there. And if you could scent it too, if you knew what things you could put in to scent it, you would put those in too. And then you would scatter them all over your floor. And then you would put your bed rug down. Or if you were already at a point in time where you were making embroidered yarn rugs or something like that, or getting on the threshold of hooked rugs. But by the time hooked rugs are coming in, most people will have something of a floor. I say that, but yet my grandmother growing up had a dirt floor. So it really depends on where you're from and what your sort of economic situation was and what was a priority for your family in terms of occupation and where you lived and what you needed to do in a day. But I thought that was really interesting. That reminded me of something and I just lost it. It's worth saying too, we're out of time. I'll end on this note. We'll come back to the early rugs and work our way up to the hooked rugs. Won't take long. It's worth saying too, that when you think about these early American homes, you have to remember that when settlers came here, there was no sort of rationing of trees. And in England, there was. So in England, because trees were finite, there wasn't unlimited supply. You couldn't, yourself and your family, even if you had the means, you couldn't cut down like hundreds of trees in a year and waste them and deprive other people of heat and cooking possibilities. So everything was sort of rationed, for lack of a better word. You could only have X amount of trees. But when people came to the US, there were no rules like that. And it was limitless forests. So what people immediately did was cut down all of the trees around them and hoard them for heat, for firewood, for building, for lots of things. Teddy, be quiet. I'm still doing the end. And because of that, the thing that happened next that was unexpected is that because the trees were no longer there on the hillsides, there became a fifth season of the year that was called the mud season. This happened in northern New England mostly. As soon as the thaw happened, those trees weren't there, and the leaves that they dropped weren't there to stop the mud from everything thawing, everything rolling downhill. And then there would be a season where people were locked inside their house for months because of mud. They literally couldn't get anything to wheel through the mud while it thawed because the trees were taken so quickly, not in a natural progression. And you have to think about that too in terms of the floor and the rugs that you would put down or not put down. So there will be a delay in early America in making rugs because your floors will be filthy for a long time, right? We made a few mistakes that we didn't see coming. Dog going crazy, Zoom meeting started, kids back at school. I will talk to you tomorrow. We'll pick up with the early history of rugs, and we'll come up to the beginning of hooked rugs tomorrow. Tomorrow, Zoom. No, we won't. I'll send you the information for our Zoom call tomorrow. I will talk with you tomorrow, not at you tomorrow. We'll continue this thread on Thursday. I'm going to post right now info for our Zoom meeting. Email me at ribboncandyhooking@gmail.com if you want the Zoom info, or look at the Facebook group, Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. See you tomorrow. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.
Sorry, there was a bit of a tailwind of